Hello everyone, this is Emil Willemsen. In this video I'll continue my series on breaking down this piece called Chromatic Vanguard, which is a quick piece I created in Unity. This particular video will be about path tracing, which is a big emphasis on this project, trying out Unity's preview packages, and this video is more about me from an artist point of view, trying to describe my experiences and less so a more technical breakdown. So if you're interested in seeing how the path tracing will be available in Unity and what it actually does, then stick around. If you're uncertain about how to install path tracing in the first place, I recommend going to Unity docs and following their installation guide. It shouldn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes. I won't go in too much into the technical stuff either, because that's not really my strong side. This is more working with it in practical, and the ups and downs and pros and cons of that. And in short, actually I think it's pretty amazing, and that's a really good news. Not having to work with reflection probes, they are totally out of the way. Same goes for light probes and light baking. And while that can produce pretty great results as well, this is amazing in the sense that with pretty much just putting on path tracing in your volume, out of the box you get pretty stunning light results. So if you have the hardware for it, I think it's the future actually. And for me, it was great to focus on a lot of other stuff than having to deal with baking light maps for hours and hours. One thing that was a major concern doing this was whether or not it would actually work with outdoor scenes. Because I saw a lot of examples of indoor scenes with small rooms and pretty few objects, but going for a full-fledged scene like this with a lot of different assets and like a huge environment, I wasn't really sure whether or not it would pull off, but actually the performance has been pretty great. So in short, it is actually possible to create an outdoor scene and have a lot of different, or at least a lot of objects in your scene. As you can see, a lot of them are the same, just duplicated and rotated and scaled differently. But performance wise, it's totally feasible to work like this, as long as you can work with the noise. So that's one of the main downsides of path tracing, that it has to converge into a single image before actually being like reducing the noise to a point where it's not that visible. For me personally, creating this, I thought it was a good trade-off. It's something I would be willing to do again, because as you can see, it takes only like 1, 2, 2.5, 3 seconds before it's at a stage where it's possible to where it doesn't really make a big difference, and it's not a problem. So that's a trade-off that I'm willing to take, at least with the hardware setup that I have available for this project. And as you can see here in the bottom of the scene view and also in the game view, there is a slight small transparent line, and that's actually the buffer that tells me whether or not the frame has accumulated. And even though it's only now about like 20% of the full length, it's not really it's not really an obstacle working in this scene like this. And so if we go into our global volume, this is where the path tracing setting is. The maximum samples is what you see here. How many samples does it actually calculate before the final image is converged? And this is progressive, so even if I set it to something like 10,000, it won't really be a problem for working in the scene, because it'll only do it progressively. One of the things that I found was really important to take a decision on, like somewhat early on, is the maximum depth. So how many bounces do I allow the light to do? As a default, it's 1 minimum and a maximum of 2. And I actually found it pretty decent for my use case. So actually, after completing the scene to this stage, I tried fiddling around with increasing the bounces, but that's also, as the light bounces more times, you can see the scene quickly brightens, and it actually becomes quite heavier as well. So you have to do some compensation afterwards, turn down the exposure on the scene overall. So it's not only for quality, it's also for the amount of light in the scene. A thing to notice as well is that path tracing overrides any of the other RTX settings in your volume. So if I were to enable screen space global illumination and the other ones, they wouldn't really affect, because path tracing takes priority. So that's one of the things I didn't understand initially, that path tracing is an alternative and not it's an alternative to the other ray tracing features. So you kind of have to take a decision on which one to go for. But it's pretty easy to change even after working with the scene. So just disabling the path tracing is, without having any other effect on, is pretty dramatic, as you can see. There's a huge difference, and this isn't of course, it doesn't make sense to have path tracing disabled and have nothing else enabled. You would probably do some baked lighting or do another ray traced setup. So this is just to illustrate how much it actually does without any other effect enabled. But also from an artist point of view, that's quite amazing to open up a new project, create a volume, and take path tracing on and have great lighting and render quality out of the box. And that's set with only one directional light. That's the only light in the scene, apart from the HDRP and path tracing. Then there's only a single directional light. And one of the small tips I also found out was useful is that you have to have always refresh on. There's a small box up here, and under the camera up here you have to enable temporal anti-aliasing and do the same inside your camera. If you don't do that, you might have a problem with slight bouncing of the image, especially in the game view over here. So go to post anti-aliasing as well here and choose TAA. Just to show you guys that reflections are actually working, I go to just for fun's sake create a mirror and see that it does reflect stuff that's out of camera view. So my scene is not particularly heavy on reflections or subsurface scattering and stuff like that. But even though, just to show you guys that it is reflecting correctly. I can also show you the subsurface scattering here on the two characters, which is one thing that RTX path tracing is great for. So if we go to this character's material here, so just setting it to subsurface scattering, you can see just going with the default profile here, you can see the green parts where subsurface scattering is actually showing. I'll just choose a different, it's just a slight bug here, just give me like this. So it's a skin diffusion profile instead, and you can see the results here. And this is just a quick sketch, so actually iterating on this, you can get pretty amazing results, I'm sure. So one of the pitfalls of working with path tracing in Unity at the moment is compatibility. So this is really new. Right now it's in, I believe it's in an alpha version. So it won't work, for instance, with the shader graph. No, sorry, not the shader graph, but the VFX graph. So any kind of particle system that you might intend for your scene is not gonna work with path tracing enabled. It won't work with terrain either. It won't work with volumetric scattering inside fog volumes. It won't work with LOD groups. So for instance, these assets that I've been working with here, I just took one LOD because it won't really work with LOD groups. It'll just always pick the highest quality. It also won't work with tessellation. It won't work with decals, and generally you have to be quite careful of how many different objects you're gonna place in your scene. Because like right now, we're also recording, so the computer is struggling just a little bit, but generally I could tell a big difference on the amount of objects. Especially cut out materials like grass and vegetation is really taxing on the system. But huge cliffs and stuff like this, it is quite performant actually. There's also right now in this version a problem with actually recording. So whenever you start recording, it won't really work with path tracing. It won't calculate it correctly. So at the moment you have to rely on just exporting screenshots through Windows or Mac or whatever. There is also a current bug that might be solved pretty soon, but working with skinned mesh renderers, as you can see here, kind of creates ghosting. So if you look at the character on the left here, if you scrub the timeline, he's animating, but it's not really updating each frame correctly. So he'll start to appear down here, and the other one will be like a kind of ghost. And if I move my scene view to the left here, you can see that it updates to the correct frame, like this. And if I scrub it back, he'll do the same kind of ghosting, and I have to move my camera again for him to go back to that pose. This is a bug, so it'll probably be fixed pretty soon, and then you can have animated scenes in Unity using path tracing. So this was like an overview of my thoughts on trying path tracing for this particular scene. If you want to go more in depth, I leave a couple of links in the description where you can get more technical on how it actually works and how to go about performance, which is of course a crucial aspect of this. So I hope it was somewhat useful. and if you want to dive further into creating this piece, check out the other videos in the series. Bye.